What's going on, guys? Magdallan here. Today I would like to talk about Torchlight Infinite. Season 2 is underway, and I wanted to share my thoughts about that generally, and then I've got some tips for new players or Path of Exile players coming over for the first time. And then I want to jump into a little bit of developer feedback. I've got some tough love to share with the developers over there. I think there are some things that they really need to address if they want this game to be taken more seriously. Now, as far as the league and the mechanic, Season 2, I think it's a banger, as I thought Season 1 was a banger. I'm having a fantastic time moving my character into the end game and gearing out, all of that stuff. The leveling experience was very smooth. The curve for progression is well thought out, makes sense, and feels good the entire time through, all the way up to and including end game. And I just think that's fantastic. The league mechanic itself, I think, is very interesting. I have not done the final boss, but I have done the witch boss all the way up to time mark 7. And it's a really well-designed boss fight, in my opinion. The mechanics are easy to understand, but challenging. And they have opted to, and I don't know if they've done this with other bosses, but at least in this case, as you increase the time mark or the difficulty, the mechanics increase. There's more stuff going on, and I think that's fantastic. It helps you to learn the boss fight, and this is coming from somebody that I will avoid bossing in Path of Exile basically at all costs. And I'm finding myself almost looking forward to the next time I'm going to fight this witch encounter. It really is a good boss. It's fun, and I can't recommend it enough. And then the new hero seems like it's been received pretty well, the cat girl, though I will note it seems like it's pretty instantly become the meta, and I don't want there to be a trend that continues where each season there's a $15 hero that if you don't buy it, you feel like, if I just shelled out the $15, I'd be able to, play with the big boys. That's not the feeling that I think you want most of your player base to have. All right, let's jump into a few tips here. The first thing I would do if you're new to the game is go to the settings page and go to the screen settings tab. And then there is a UI scaling option that you can drag all the way down, and that will make the game look a lot more like a traditional PC ARPG. And then there is also an option to turn off the hover over tooltips on the main UI display for your skills at the bottom of the screen. And that was something I complained about in at least one video in Season 1, but it's good to see that they've fixed that. And then another tip is to do the league mechanic at all levels of the game. Whenever you can access it, I would do it. I found it to be very rewarding. Particularly when I hit maps, I found that doing it right away really smoothed out the process of grabbing that first 5, 10, 15 FE and getting my first few upgrades, so I can't recommend that enough. Another thing is, if you're leveling up and you're in the 60s or 70s, and you're feeling like your character isn't as powerful as you want, or it's just not working the way that you wanted it to, keep in mind that there's a huge power spike at level 80 when you get your last trait, and then there's also another power spike that happens once you get enough points into your various talent tabs. There are the 2 special talents at the top of the page. You need to get that last one going probably before you're really going to know if the build's going to work out. And that's going to happen, for me, it happens at level 85 or so. And so keep that in mind. You do have to press forward a little bit before all of the different working parts of a build are going to come together. And then also keep in mind, you really do need to blast a lot of maps before you're going to get the card deck system really working for you. You need to upgrade the cards, you need to set your deck up, and that's going to take some time. But once you get that going, I think you'll notice that a lot more stuff is dropping, and so on and so forth. And then the last tip that I have is, if you are like me and you don't like crafting in Path of Exile at all, don't take that attitude over into this game, because it'll hurt you. The crafting is really powerful. You can exponentially increase the power of items that you both buy off the trade house and find on the ground. The system is more forgiving than Path of Exile. There's still a little bit of the, I got the mod that I wanted, or, the juxtaposition of frustration and enjoyment that there is in Path of Exile, but without as much of the high stakes. And I find that for me, that actually makes the difference. And so I'm finding myself often trying to craft a piece of gear instead of just buying it. And maybe that's an indication that I should be taking a harder look at Path of Exile crafting and exploring that a little bit more. But for me, the main negative with Path of Exile's crafting is the consistency of bricking items. And that is just not an issue in Torchlight. So absolutely jump in there and do some crafting. And lastly here, I want to share some feedback for the devs. There was a sound bug that they have fixed in a patch that went out yesterday, I believe. But the bug was persistent for several days into the league, and you got to get that shit fixed earlier next time. You have to have a team ready, or whatever it is that you have to do to make sure that something like this that pops up day one of a league, that you can get that patched immediately. It can't be something that just lingers. It makes the game feel unpolished and cheap, and you're going to lose players due to that. I think these types of bugs are the things that really hurt the experience in ways that are difficult to quantify. And so I would say in the future, it's really important that you guys have the ability to do a patch day one or day two that can address something like this. And then the main thing is the loot pets have got to go. The pets that increase your drops are hurting your game. The game is good enough to stand alone without predatory garbage. And the fact that there are so many creators now that are using the phrase, it's fairly unimpactful, I think is kind of ridiculous. They are impactful. You're getting resistances, you're getting tons of damage, you're getting more loot, all of the stuff that anybody cares about. When I have a character at endgame in Path of Exile, very quickly I get to a point where I'm happy to spend 1 to 2, 3 divines per 1% character damage. And so even if the pets that I have are only 5 or 10% better than the next guy who hasn't paid money, you're talking about the equivalent of maybe 20, 30, 40 divines in Path of Exile as far as gear is concerned for a character at similar progression. That's not fairly unimpactful. In a lot of cases, that's basically like people make builds for less than that budget. And so the idea that essentially another slot of gear, or, a quarter of a slot of gear or something, that's not an impactful thing in a game where the only thing that matters is your character progression, I think is disingenuous and kind of ridiculous. So number one, I wish that content creators would, if you're not going to be fully honest and condemn the pets without caveat, then maybe just shut the fuck up about it. And then the next thing is Carino. I have noticed that when I get to the point where I have all the talents unlocked, as well as, all the traits unlocked, there's a bug where I get the message, hero trait skill slots are available, and they're not. The only way they would become available is if I switched one of my traits, and I don't want to do that, and so it essentially makes the notification panel that tells you when something needs to be done, it makes it much less useful because it's just always telling me there's something that I need to do. And then I click on it and it just says the same hero trait skill slots are available. So that would be something I would say to look into. Another issue is the proofreading of text throughout the game. I have seen everything from just strange phraseology to outright grammatical errors and spelling errors. And we're into the second league now, folks. It's a beta thing, which I've also heard people still saying. I don't care about that. You already got your one league of like, it's a beta, so we're not going to be really harsh about the criticism. That time has passed. You're selling stuff for real money. The game is available to the public. You had a full 3-month cycle where you monetized and were able to get feedback, and you dropped the ball on the text localization. And again, like the sound bug, I think this is a thing that it might be difficult to quantify in terms of numbers. I can't tell you every 5 minutes you lose this many players because of the proofreading. But what I can tell you is that when someone encounters text that seems to be poorly written, it is going to affect their faith in the idea that the rest of the game is going to have the polish. They're going to take the game less seriously when they get to endgame and the bosses have blatant, ridiculous audio bugs, and they look at their tooltips and there's spelling errors and commas in the wrong spot and so on and so forth. You really need to get that stuff fixed. Another thing is the sensitivity of clicking on the UI is weird. And I haven't heard anybody else talking about this, but I have never played a game where when I'm in the UI, it's more likely that I try and click on a button or something and just nothing happens and I have to just click again. I don't know if that is a function of, the sensitivity of movement when you're clicking, something like that. I'm not a developer. I don't know how that stuff works, but what I can tell you from, just experience is it feels weird compared to every other video game that I've played. Another bug that I encounter fairly frequently that I don't see people talking about is if you're holding down a skill and then you're using other skills while you have that button continuously depressed, you occasionally get locked into that skill. So I've noticed this particularly. I'll get locked into my dash skill, and so then I can't shoot anymore, and every time it comes off cooldown, my character just jumps in a wild random direction. And again, this is a thing that I commented on in Season 1, and it seems like they just didn't think it was a big enough issue to allocate resources to fix it. And I would put this into the same bucket as the sound bug and the Carino bug, as well as the proofreading. These are polish issues that, these aren't beta issues. These are things that should have been solved in alpha. And so, yeah, get that stuff fixed. And then lastly, I think I want to talk about the talent page. And the reason for that is I just think you need to scrap it and come up with something new. Because not being able to have hover over tooltips or even pushing alt so that you can see what the individual talents do is really weird. There's also a lot of confusion with icons being the same between different talents, and then they have different effects. So you can't even just at a glance look at the screen and see, okay, this has the foot with the wind icon, so therefore that's going to be a movement speed. Nope, it could be attack speed. It'll be something speed related, but it's not enough information for it to be useful. And it seems like the entire talent page system is counterintuitive to the idea of making and sharing builds. I know that Maxroll, I think, has some kind of a build planner going now. I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but nonetheless, in-game, there needs to be a better system for displaying that information so that it can be, number one, more intuitive for the player, but number two, more reasonable for discussing, sharing, and looking at different builds. And I think that is about all I've got for you guys today. I know the feedback was a little bit negative, and I don't want that to overshadow how good the game is and how good the league is generally. But at the same time, we do have to sort of keep it real here, and we're, well into the development of this game now, and it is time for us to, as players, I think, offer the hard feedback and then see how they respond, and then make the final decision on, is this a game that's worth investing time into every league cycle, or is it really just a fantastic game that is ruined by predatory mechanics and lack of developer sensitivity to, issues of localization and bugs and all of those things. And so, yeah, I will be back very soon with a Path of Exile farming video. I'm doing some harvest, and I want to share that with you guys very soon. And then I will have a build guide for my Carino character here, hopefully in the next couple days. And so, yeah, if you found anything interesting or engaging in the video, please do hit the like and subscribe button. We are climbing up to 1,000 subs. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. I appreciate you.